Hello and welcome to another Euranet Plus debate. Today we're going to talk about migration, a hot topic in Brussels. I'm Yamin Zancel, and with me I have member of the European Parliament, centre-left Elly Schlein from Italy, and Marie de Zomer, a senior migration expert from European Policy Centre. Welcome and thanks for joining us. We also have, as usual, questions from our members, but I will start with a question on my own. Last Sunday, we had 16 member states in Brussels convened by the Commission to a meeting on migration and asylum policy in the EU. It has not yielded any interesting results, nothing very practical is appearing at this stage. And we're going to have another summit next week on the topic. Probably, it's going to take a lot of this agenda and probably won't also produce very much outcomes at this stage. But we see that there's an increasingly political debate around migration asylum, and that it's becoming more and more security-oriented and potentially capable of causing great harm to the EU. Surprisingly, the European Parliament a couple of weeks ago had actually reached a compromise position on the matter with all member states in the parliament. Parliamentaries from all member states. How come? The idea was mainly to propose an automatic burden sharing of refugees, and also the Commission's should actually cut a budget for member states not taking their quotas of migrants and refugees, as we call it. Do you believe, Elly, you've been supporting this compromise. Do you believe that it's still possible to have member states back your texts today?
Of course, it's the only European solution that we have. We worked 2 years in a very long and delicate negotiation to reach that compromise that was voted by 2/3 of the Parliament, so a huge majority on such a divisive matter. It is the sign that in the European Parliament we know that we need common European solution to what are clearly common European challenges that no member state can face alone. It's high time that also the governments put back at the center the principle of solidarity on which the Union was founded. Otherwise, we might lose it because we see a clear polarization, we see the division at the Council level, and I think on this issue, the future of the European Union is really at stake.
What is your position, Marie?
Yeah, I would like to add my voice to that. And I think a couple of weeks ago I was a bit more skeptical when you saw the debates in the Council. But now I think it's come even stronger to the fore. It's become more in the press as well. I think there is a very clear understanding all across Europe, and even more so because of the level of political crisis that we've reached now than there was before, that we need a common European responsibility sharing mechanism. So I think paradoxically, in all of this, the odds of the Parliament proposal have been strengthened.
That's interesting, really. I will go to a question from Claudia. It's our member from AMS in Germany, and she's actually asking about this solidarity in the EU.
Hello from Germany. The clock is ticking. The migration issue has the potential to break the European Union. And now the question is, why don't we try a very old wisdom? With honey, you can catch flies. So obviously, there's no agreement based on solidarity inside. Why not shifting from useless asking for solidarity again and again to giving all the EU support and all the EU funding to the member states receiving refugees instead?
Elly, what is your opinion on this? And do you think member states, and Italy in particular, would accept to do this?
Well, it was already done in these years. It's clear that financial solidarity is not enough. We need what the Parliament has put forward, a clear plan to overcome the hypocritical criterion of the first country of entry that placed all the responsibilities on the countries at the hot borders, let's say, of the European Union, and to overcome it by replacing it with mechanism that first of all takes into consideration the meaningful links of the asylum seekers. This is the only way to, let's say, avoid the secondary movements that are so much obsessing some European governments, because there is no place for considering these as people with links with other countries, as family links. Okay, so we insisted on a system that asked to all member states to do their part. If we share this effort, it's absolutely sustainable for everyone. We are not talking about an invasion. Let's remind ourselves that in 2016, the year with the highest number of asylum requests, we were talking about 1,300,000 asylum requests in the whole European Union, which is a continent of 500 million inhabitants. It means that we're talking about 0.25% of the population. Nothing that they cannot deal together, and I completely agree. I tell to the governments all the time that it's time to act, because it's exactly the inaction of these years and the incapability to provide European answers that fueled nationalism, racism, and sometimes fascism in our member state. I think that now Merkel and Macron are realizing what is at stake, and they have to support the proposal of the European Parliament. It's if they don't want their pro-European stance to be only a facade.
Okay, yes, but irregular migration is particularly problematic, and this is really fueling much of these security argument of rightists and right-wing parties. More EU leaders, including France now, and obviously also in Italy, Interior Minister Salvini, they're looking outwards for solutions. I mean, they want to basically outsource their problem to others, and they're focusing on external border management, strengthening Frontex, and you know, trying to find an agreement. What do you think can be achieved here, and can we realistically somehow seal our borders to migrants, economic migrants in particular, and refugees?
In my point of view, particularly at this point in time, it's unrealistic and it's a dangerous strategy. If we will ever want to move that way, it will take enormous financial capital, diplomatic capital, practical capital. We're talking of a solution, if at all it's feasible, it'll only be in place years from now. Even if it's in place, we'll still need to find them, because then the idea would be that we separate economic migrants from those in need of international protection. So we'll still need a system as to how to divide responsibility among the member states when they come from the external side. So the focus should really be on how do we put into place a solidary mechanism on responsibility sharing. And it's a bit too easy to turn outwards when you're having problems to come to a solution inwards. And it's not a sustainable nor a good strategy at the moment. It's actually very dangerous, and it risks shifting the focus away from what we really need to do.
But some say that the risk is actually internal in the EU, that you could break the union apart, and that's why it's actually better to ask third countries to get involved. And that's also a question from our correspondent, our radio in Italy. Mm-hmm. We have Gigi from Radio 24, and he's asking about Salvini's recent trip to Libya.
Good afternoon from Gigi Donelli, Radio 24 in Milan. My question concerns the proposal made by Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, who yesterday in Libya said basically, we will help as Europe, and I will ask Europe to help Libyan to look after and close their frontiers to the southern incoming migration. Do you think it's a realistic proposal? Will Europe go after Matteo Salvini's proposal?
What do you think, Elly? Is it something? I mean, he was not successful this time, but is it possible to achieve something with this strategy, especially in Libya?
Well, unless they want to bring us back to colonialism, it's very difficult to see these statements on creating centers in other countries, third countries, on which we don't have any kind of sovereignty. So it's not realistic, it's simply propaganda. And by the way, it's nothing new, nothing original. For years, they've been trying to do externalization of our borders and responsibility. Look, the agreement with Libya, with the agreement with Turkey, but also the migration compacts with many African countries that are putting also at risk our soft power and the relationship with Africa. And by the way, by this tendency of, let's say, taking development aid money and putting it into border management in Africa, we're risking to create even more problems than the ones that they would like to solve, because we are hampering freedom of movement there and hampering their economies. So we need to have much more coherent policies at the European level, also on trade, fiscal policies and development policies. Otherwise, we will not help to create opportunities for young Africans. And last thing, externalization has not worked. It has only resulted in new routes, even more dangerous, and always towards Italy and Greece. That makes a paradox to have this kind of proposal from the Italian government instead of focusing on Dublin reform and internal solidarity, which is the only key to solve the issue.
What do you think, Marie? And do you think third countries or countries of transit or origin could have a bigger role to play here?
Well, I share Elly's views there, and I think the answer is quite simple and already lies in the immediate response of the Libyan authorities, that they were not considering this, that they were not willing to cooperate. And we had a similar response from Tunisia earlier on. And as I said before, the diplomatic capital needed to get these things off ground, I think, is highly underestimated. And so for now, and given these responses, it doesn't look good.
So you're doubtful, because the Commission also mentioned that they were trying to look for partners in this plan. You're doubtful they're going to
At the moment, I am very doubtful. I think there's a serious underestimation of the kind of investments in a number of ways that would be needed to get something like that in place.
But in fact, we are going to, the EU is going to start negotiating again with countries from Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific. And we know that it's been a condition also from, let's say, Hungary to link the discussion, the negotiations with the migration in general. What do you think can be achieved also in this specific partnership context with ACP countries?
Well, it's going to be very difficult because, these kind of offers are not so relevant for those countries that, since their economies are based also on the remittances that are much more than the offers of, for example, the Trust Fund for Africa. At the same time, there are other global actors very interested in the African context. They are doing investment without asking any kind of conditionality, nor on border management, nor on the respect of human rights, which is the only kind of good conditionality to pose. So again, we are risking our relationship with the African countries. We are risking also to focus only on the countries placed on the routes towards Europe and forgetting least developed countries that need more cooperation. And at the same time, as I said, the measures that are being put in place are, let's say, decreasing the funds for implementing the new sustainable development goals and helping to create really alternatives for the people who are forced to leave. So it's really a blind approach, the one that we are seeing also on the development side. But again, I think that if you think about it, it's a ridiculous debate. Why are we doing so? Because there are some countries that are forgetting that the Article 80 of the treaty asks for solidarity and equal sharing of responsibility. They signed those treaties and they should not forget it, because Hungary, for example, didn't want to relocate 1,294 migrants through 2 years, and it's a country of 10 million inhabitants. What are we really talking about here?
Okay, we're going to turn to a last question from our member, is Stavros in Greece from Sky Radio, and he's asking about ongoing discussion between member states.
The German Chancellor repeated today in her joint press briefing with Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez that a common solution cannot be reached by Thursday and that bilateral agreements are the only solution she sees. Would this mean a two-speed Europe on this matter in the near future?
I'm not sure if it would mean a two-speed or if we should move that far. I think bilateral agreements or even trilateral ones are allowed in the Dublin regulation as it stands. Perhaps it could help a bit in alleviating some of the pressure faced by some countries. However, this is not a long-term solution. The problem and the problem with solidarity we've been seeing since 2015 and even before that requires a more comprehensive solution than ad hoc further bilateral movements.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, it
Elly?
would be the end of the union. Why have we made the union if not to achieve a common solution to common challenges? And this reform, the Dublin regulation reform, is a paradigm of why you need the European Union. So we need to go in that direction, but I agree that it will not be enough. The European Union has to face a complex phenomenon as migration with short-term, mid-term and long-term answers. On the short-term and real humanitarian response of the European Union, a mission of search and rescue operation. The NGOs, there is a terrible debate on the NGOs saving lives at sea, but let's not forget that they're only filling up the gaps of the lack of an institutional response by the European Union. On the mid-term, to overcome the Dublin regulation reform and achieve real internal solidarity with a fair sharing of responsibility in all member states, and also opening up safe and legal ways of access to all EU member states. Otherwise, Italy and Greece will continue to be very dangerous only point of access to the entire continent. And on the long term, as I said already, to work really on the root causes of migration, conflicts and inequalities, but with much more coherent European policies. We can do it. It's just a matter of political will.
Okay, so we need an EU solution, EU-wide solution. That's going to be the end word for today. Thank you both for being present, and thank you for watching Euranet Plus Debate.